Meredith should come from Tennessee. Oh, yeah, she's not on yours. I don't know what I was thinking. Never mind.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:02, and I would like to call the meeting to order. Britton, would you mind doing the roll call?
Sure. Ms. Earhart. Dr. Baravecchio. State your name for the record, please.
Lenora Robinson.
All right, and Ms. Robinson is here on behalf of Dr. Baravecchio. Ms. Bazile. Ms. Crane.
Here.
Ms. Hagan.
Here.
Ms. Hano.
Here.
Ms. Harmon.
Present.
Ms. Heimel. Soroka.
Here.
Ms. Stewart.
Here.
Perfect. And that is 6 members. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Britton. Before we get started, I want to remind you all of a few rules. For attendees, please wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking. To help the meeting run smoothly, please keep side conversations to a minimum and comments related to the topic we are discussing. Also, comments about a person's character will not be tolerated.
I do have one more thing to add, sorry. All of these microphones that we have on the table, they're constantly live. We have no way of muting individual microphones that might be in front of you. And they pick up literally everything. So keep that in mind, especially if you're having any side conversations. Will be picked up and broadcast on YouTube, especially if you're shuffling any papers or making a lot of noise, it can be picked up on the mics. So please just be considerate of that.
Okay, everyone should have reviewed the January meeting summary, which was attached in the agenda you received via email. There's also a copy in your committee packet. Just a reminder, we do not have an April meeting summary since we did not meet last quarter. If there are no objections to the summary, we can approve the summary by a unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Okay, hearing no objections, the January meeting summary is passed by unanimous consent. So next on the agenda is a discussion about a recent financial audit that was completed on Families Helping Families of New Orleans. You received a copy of the audit that was sent to the council. You also received a copy of the letter our executive director sent to the center's board requesting a corrective action plan for the concerns noted in the audit and their response. Britton, would you start us off by summarizing the concerns that were noted in the auditor's report?
Sure. So I didn't put it up on the screen because both documents are pretty lengthy and you have that in your packets. So I'm not going to pull it up on the screen because we're not going to go necessarily line by line where you would be able to scroll through and see it anyway. But like Ms. Stewart said, you should have included in your packet is going to be the audit and then it's going to be the corrective action plan. So our FHF centers go through annual financial audits, and that's through the legislative auditor's office. And so since they are the experts, we rely on their information to kind of paint a financial picture for the centers. We do our own audits each year, and that's mostly looking at deliverables, which is what we report out to you every quarter that we have a meeting. And it's those deliverables that we have in our contract or those things being met. We don't necessarily have the expertise to go into detailed financial statements and things that a legislative auditor is looking for in that particular audit. So we rely on those in conjunction with our deliverables being met to kind of paint a picture of performance, if you will, of the center for that year. So in this particular audit, it's a public document. It is on the legislative auditor's website. It detailed multiple concerns. And hopefully you had a chance to review it ahead of time. But some of the concerns that were noted were issues with bank account reconciliations not being completed regularly or accurately, operating on lines of credit at or near the limit for much of the year, overdraft fees being charged. Many of those, it was due to payroll being drafted from an account with insufficient funds. Lack of supporting documentation on hand for things like invoices or grant documentation. And so that's more of like a bookkeeping issue. Receivables that weren't being tracked, which led to invoices going unpaid. Insufficient methods for tracking and recording employee receivables, And that's like loans or employee pay advances, those types of things. There were payroll taxes for one of the employees that went unpaid for the year. And there was a failure to submit the annual financial report to the legislative auditor within 6 months of year's end. And that had happened. Some of these I don't have which ones in particular were found in 2021 and 2022, but some of them were for 2 fiscal years and some of them were just for the 2022 year. So when we came across the audit, we did, our executive director, Amy, she reached out to the board president by phone and by email just to say, hey, we're aware of this audit. We wanted a corrective action plan of what's being done to address these concerns. And so that is, like I said, in your packet, and that was sent to us. And we also had, and I'm going to turn it over to Miss Aisha Johnson, because she is the executive director of FHF NOLA. And so she came out here just to be able to talk to you guys in more detail about what they're doing to address the concerns and answer any questions that you may have. If you want, you can come to the table. I know there's some room on this side. It should be in order, so this is the audit.
Okay.
And this is the corrective action plan. That's the letter that Amy sent and their response here.
So I have some packets going out for the committee that I put together to show you guys what we have done, what we have prepared to do with the corrective action plan. I've also included our year end from last fiscal year, showing a positive balance of what we had at the end of fiscal year. I want to say that how we got here. If I could briefly, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to say how we got here is that in those previous years of these audits, I was in the process of trying to put the organization back together from the pandemic. We're actually just getting back to our office July 1, 2022 last year. So we've only been back in our office 1 year. We did have a lot of issues with paperwork because we were shuffling back and forth, setting up home offices and making sure that individuals had all of the things that they needed to be successful at home. As the leader, I'm not making any excuses and I take full responsibility. I think that during that time, there was a lack of oversight because we were trying to not only, trying to run the organization, having a lot of our staff that was out sick, my bookkeeper who has multiple sclerosis, who was also sick often for the last couple of years, and also trying to figure out how to do the books when the executive director is not supposed to do the books. So we were in the process of trying to figure those things out. So what we've done, I did not sugarcoat anything with the auditor. I did not make up any documentation that he was looking for. We sat down and we talked about what needed to happen. The organization is very viable. I am always looking for funding to keep the organization running. In your packet, you'll also see the budget of what we use the DDC funds for. It maps out pretty much all of that. There's also in the year end, you will see that there is a pay advance outstanding, one pay advance for $1,006 something dollars. We do pay advances because at Families Helping Families, we can't give our staff paid vacations, we give insurance and all those other perks. And we're barely paying living wages. And sometimes our staff needs a pay advance just to get through the week until they can get to their next payday. We're no longer doing that anymore because the auditor brought to my attention that I'm taking too long to allow them to pay it back. And so I was allowing them to pay it back a little bit at a time, when they got paid. And so when it came time for the audit, they weren't paid off all the way by the end of the fiscal year. And so what I've decided to do is not offer that perk anymore to keep that from being an issue. We maxed out our line of credit because during the pandemic, we had 3 or 4 funders that did not pay us for months at a time. And so we had to use the line of credit in order to continue to get paid and keep the organization running throughout the pandemic. And so we did, in fact, max out the line of credit. It's no longer maxed out. We have been paying on it, and we've worked out other arrangements with the bank as well. I've also included in your packet a list of grants and that we have written for, grants that we have gotten, grants that are pending, that we continue to use to continue the operation of the organization. I've also included you our engagement letter. I did let the bookkeeper go, and we're now using a accounting firm so that all of our information and everything could be correct. He's also sitting in to correct any other issues that he may see that he has. We're actually in the process of reviewing all of those things. We are preparing for our upcoming audit from the last fiscal year. So I'm pretty sure that you all will see that this new audit will be a whole lot better. We lost our auditor during the pandemic, so we had to get a new auditor that was also not familiar, but we didn't know this, that was not familiar with nonprofit organizations. The other reason we maxed out our line of credit is because he did not know that if we didn't turn our audit in time, we would be put on a non-compliant list, which would in turn stop our funding from coming in. And so we had to use, again, that line of credit in order to continue to operate. We are, in moving forward, making all of these different changes that I have also included in your packet. We also have, the other thing was during pandemic, we could not have our yearly fundraiser that usually brings in $35,000 to the organization for general funding. We could not do that. We are finally beginning to put Families Helping Families NOLA back together. We are growing. We have started a new program called Computing for Youth with Autism that has brought in a lot of additional funding for the organization. We are now recognized as LRS vendors. So we are helping individuals who are in our program to get jobs. And LRS is a funding stream now for the organization as well. We are, like I said, we are moving forward. We are addressing all of these things. These things have already begun with hiring the accounting firm and working with them to correct anything that they see for the next audit, which is about to happen. I'm more than happy. Of course, the audit is public knowledge. It's on the legislative auditor's website. However, as soon as the audit is done, I can share that with the council for you all to review, and I can come back and answer any questions that you all may have as well. And to say that the money that we receive from the council is key to keeping our organization up and running. It is a huge portion of how we continue to run the organization. So taking away the contract would be detrimental to the organization and to the families that we serve. I know that Nicole is going to share a report on the Families Helping Family Centers and the amount of individuals that we all serve, what's prevalent, what's not prevalent, and how we move forward in all of these endeavors. I am asking you all to take all of these things in consideration when you're thinking about this new fiscal year contract and to allow me to make this right. We have never, ever in the history that I've been here, I've been with Families Helping Families 13 years. I've been the ED for about 8 years. We have never, ever, ever had a complaint to come to the DDC. We've never had an issue with our audits until now. Borrowing, it's pandemic time, everything was new, we're trying to figure it out. I'm asking that you all give us a chance to correct this and to make this right. And you won't be sorry. Anybody have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if this, who requested you to come to us?
Who sent this request to you guys? So it was an anonymous email that came across that was sent to you all.
Okay.
Yeah,
It was an anonymous email, but the audit is,
public knowledge.
yeah, and separate from that. So we would have questioned about the audit anyway. As staff, we already knew about it and we're looking at it.
And the audit should be sent to us as part of the contractual
Mhm.
obligation whenever it's done. This one wasn't, I don't know, we found it probably about a month and a half after it came out. Just cruising through the website, but it is public knowledge. That's usually where we go to the website if we haven't received it to find them.
Oh, yes, I didn't know that. I thought it was just sent through the letter.
I have one question. The letter that you sent in the blue folder that you provided on the second page. Number 5, it just says this was the responsibility of timely filing of annual reports.
That's gonna lie with the accounting firm that we hired. They're
Okay.
gonna be doing all of that stuff.
And that's the,
Are and done. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a couple of questions. One would be, I guess for the outstanding lines of credit,
Mhm.
what's the end date for that? I know you said you worked out a plan. and
Yeah.
You anticipate having that paid off.
Yeah, by the end of this year, December. Mhm.
So December, so 2 months from now.
Yes.
Or-
Mhm.
As far as the legislative auditor's annual reporting requirements,
Mhm.
you had mentioned something, and I don't know if I misunderstood, but the auditor at the time did not know of those requirements. So they didn't cue you, I guess, to say, hey, this has to be done.
Yep.
So from a responsibility standpoint, shouldn't you keep track of that and
I should.
ask the auditor?
Absolutely. And I was in constant communication with this auditor, and I actually told the auditor that we need to have this done in a timely manner. He actually filed for an extension. He filed for an extension so that we could extend the time that he needed to complete the audit. The extension was granted. And so we continued to move forward. It wasn't until I found that we weren't getting payments that he did not file the actual, or like he went past the extension date.
And when did you find out you weren't getting payment?
When we weren't getting payments. So
Was it when
It
the
was-
audit was completed or when?
The audit should have been completed at that time, but it wasn't.
No, I guess I was. Did you realize prior to the 2022 audit, when they came in to do the audit, did you realize you weren't getting paid, or was it when they came in and they started looking in your books that you realized,
No,
oh,
no,
we didn't have these payments?
no. Yeah, I knew that we didn't have the payments because I was calling and saying, hey, we didn't get paid. And that's when I found out that we were on the non-compliant list.
The other thing I had a question about. I mean, I understand COVID, it threw everybody into a tailspin. But you know, we were home for 2 years. A lot of these other centers were home, and I don't understand. Or how are your responsibilities going to change? Like, what have you put in place to do these follow-ups? Because I get it, everybody's working from home, but like, I still had to make sure the person I supervised was getting their work done. I
Mhm.
had to make sure they were set up, that
Mhm.
I kept track of my invoices, that I kept track of things. And just dealing with what we do with the other centers, they had to do the same thing. And so I'm wondering what makes yours the exception to all the others.
I'm not as seasoned as the other FHF directors. I'm not as free as the other directors. When the pandemic hit, I have 2 children on autism spectrum with complex health issues. I was sick with COVID a couple of times. Staff was sick. I tried my best to supervise. I have an assistant director who also, we tried our best to supervise and make sure that things were in place and that things were happening. It was, everybody's not the same. Everybody handles things differently. I'm totally different from the other executive directors, and trying to figure that out was a huge task for me. And it still is a task for me, trying to make sure that the organization is consistent in what we're doing and making sure that the organization is viable and making sure that folks are doing what they're supposed to do. I think that my job as the executive director is to ensure that the day-to-day operations and everything is happening so the organization could run smoothly. My assistant director supervises the staff so that we can make those things happen. I now have implemented weekly check-ins with the leadership staff at the center to make sure that things are happening and running smoothly. I am more present now as opposed to the last 2 years. I am still dealing with the death of my husband, but in moving through that, I have been present, making sure that things are happening within the organization, making sure that deliverables are met. That's creating more programming, making sure that we have more funding, to continue these operations, and yeah. We did. We hired a firm.
Already?
We hired a bookkeeping firm, Carr and Dunn.
When were they hired?
I'm sorry,
When were they hired?
effective yesterday.
I have a question, Vincent. Or Ms. Stewart, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I just want to follow up with the accounting firm. Are they going to be monitoring? So I know you guys are LRS vendors now. are they gonna be monitoring state payments for
Yes,
y'all?
through the OSARC. I think that's what it's called.
So if for some reason, the DD council funding doesn't come through
They
for a
will,
month,
they will know.
they're gonna know.
Yes.
Okay.
They are going to know. I'm gonna know. It's the blurred lines with finances and the executive director. And so it's now with that, also with these new folks, is making sure what it is exactly that I can do dealing with, you know, bookkeeping and finances and all of that, because you can't, an executive director can't do all of that. We're monitoring and making sure that those things are happening, but I can't physically go in and cut a check or do all this other stuff. And, you know, I don't even make deposits. So, you know,
So I know that part of our contract is the directors would have, I think in the contract, we say quarterly calls.
mhm.
If I'm not mistaken, y'all do them. Or more often than not,
Oh, the director's calls?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, have you used them as a sounding board throughout this entire process?
Absolutely.
Or-
Yep.
But, because I'm gonna be honest, because we have to monitor these things, I'm still trying to grasp my head around 2 years of all this stuff sliding. And I understand things happen. I'm not discrediting that, but it's just really hard to figure out how so much lack of managerial responsibility has happened. Especially if you have a deputy or an assistant as well. And I guess this is probably more of a question for your board, in that how is that being addressed? Like, I understand you're putting things in place, but who monitors you to make sure that these things are happening as well? Because I get the effort of, we're doing X, Y, and Z to make sure this happens.
Mhm.
But I mean, we're only a month in
Right.
corrective action of 2 years of problems.
So, well, actually, some of those things from the first year were actually corrected. When we had the meeting when my board chair and I had a meeting with the auditor, he said this year was better than last year, but there needs to be better bookkeeping, is what he said to us. My board, I email and call my board all the time, even though we only meet quarterly. But I am in constant contact with them, with Dennis, who is our treasurer, with Lauren, who is our board chair and attorney, especially when things come up and I need to have that advice on what to do. And so what they do is, when something comes up and I'm calling them, they do their soundboard. They come, we talk about it, we try to fix it. They are aware of all of the audits. We talk about the audit in the meeting. Once the audit comes up, and we go through the meeting as a group, and then we talk about the corrective action and what the plan should look like and what the plan should be. And right now, that's where we are. You know, with the 2 years of, you know, this situation, they are always present. The other EDs have definitely, Nicole and Charlie and Chanel, those folks have always offered to help and give some advice on, you know, on certain things, especially now with all of this, when all of this started to happen. Those are folks who reached out and say, hey, if you need, let's talk about it if you need some help. And so I am not opposed to any help. I think that there's a lot of other people who know things that I don't know, and things that work for them that may definitely work for us. So I'm always out looking for additional supports, and I'm always out looking for additional help. I mean, there was times when I contacted the council about when I was trying to get us back to work, I called and I said, well, what does your schedule look like? Because I want us to go back into the office. What does your schedule look like? How can I implement that schedule? And so I'm always looking for advice and help on certain things, because all of this is both coming back and trying to deal with things and putting the organization back together is new, as opposed to coming into an organization that's there and things are set up and things are in place. If that answers your question.
I have one more question. Okay, so I know, I remember you reaching out and asking about what our
Schedules.
what our schedule was looking like. And so that was a while ago. I think we were in active COVID then. So
Yeah.
I guess the question is, what does the staff look like now?
So we are back in the office full-time, been back for the last year. We started July 1.
Is it everyone full-time, or y'all have like a rotation? Or-
Everyone is in office now. Mhm. And I think the reason for that too was because of the paperwork situation. And I was like, everybody needs to be in one place. We need to be in one place. We did implement a cloud where we can scan paperwork and put it in a cloud so folks could get to it. But it's better now that everyone is in the office and we have physical papers and receipts and so on and so forth that people are turning in.
Were y'all able to get any assistance during COVID, like through any of the PPP funds or any of that stuff
We
to help float you?
Yes, we did get some PPP money, and actually right now, we actually qualified for ERC. And that's we're supposed to get that in November, I believe.
What's ERC?
The earned retention credit or something like that.
One thing we did, I think it's included in the corrective action plan that y'all sent, was the email that was sent. We haven't really talked about it much, but we're focused more
On
on
the
the
audit.
audit.
Mhm.
But I know your center does, as part of our contract, consumer satisfaction survey, which are
Mhm.
sent to us. So can you, I guess, address maybe that email and what you get from your auditing that you do through your consumer satisfaction surveys?
We haven't had anything like that email come through our satisfaction surveys. This was our first time hearing of 20 concerned parents when we got this letter, which actually showed up after I fired an employee. And then we started getting the complaint letters stating that there was 20 concerned parents and whatever else the complaint was. My board chair and I have been open about addressing these concerns and these complaints, but we don't know who these people are. And so we can't address anonymous people, although we've put it out there and we've tried to reach out. When we do get a complaint from a parent, they usually call us, we sit down, we talk about it, and we resolve it. And then, if there's a complaint that can't be resolved, then they go to our board and they sit with our board chair and they try to work out to resolve it there. We haven't had that. We haven't had anything like that in a while. So this email that just popped up is just all new. Yeah, and we do those surveys quarterly when we make the calls to get the satisfaction surveys and ask folks, what their experience was like, with the center. And
And for that email, I don't have it memorized, but I don't know that there was a phone number. But did y'all reach back out to that email address, try to set up a meeting?
we reached out to that email address. That email was sent also, the first time it was sent to Mary Jacobs Center. And she said that she actually talked to the lady, but the lady did not want to give her, or for her to give me her name or something to that extent. I don't know, but I tried then to reach out and to no avail, no response. Nothing. We've also decided to put the complaint process on our website for folks who may have a complaint. This is what you need to do, who you need to reach out to. If you can't resolve that, here are the next steps.
Just like a logistical question. So when are those, when will the next audit be done in the audit? When would we expect to get the next audit report?
So the audit has to be done by December 31st. And so right now we are engaging an auditor now, and it might take him about 2 months. I mean, once we get the auditor engaged, then I can shoot an email saying, hey, here's the engagement. We're starting the audit process. And then I can ask him what the time frame is for you guys to expect it.
So, and I'm sorry, just another, I'm trying to make sure. So there's an independent audit that you guys pay for, but then
Yes.
the other audit is the LLA. Are there two audits?
No, it's one audit. And I think the one you're talking about is the one that Brenton was talking about, where they do more of deliverables audit.
Yeah, there's only one financial audit.
Yeah.
And then the FHF is a nonprofit. The FHF Center
Mhm.
engage their own auditor for that
Okay.
auditing process.
Mhm.
But that audit has to be turned into
The Louisiana
the
legislature.
Louisiana legislative auditor.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
That's a more logistical question. The complaint process you guys, you talked about that y'all were implementing and putting on your website. Are y'all going to collect data from that
We could.
survey that would, and I'm just thinking, like, okay, so what are our steps? There's some things I think the council will need to see. So just trying to think
Mhm.
when we would expect that audit. If there's data, then potentially we could see related to the complaint process
Mhm.
to get a feel for the community.
Right.
So,
Well, we have those surveys that we do quarterly. And so we turn those into the council with our quarterly reports or our monthly reports. And so that data is there for 3 months of folks that we've talked to.
What's the process for determining who completes a satisfaction survey? How do you grab those individuals?
So we randomly choose from the 3 months of contact logs that we have. Yes, ma'am.
Is it same amount every time? Like, do you have a set amount of
Surveys,
surveys? for
it's
each quarter?
10. Yes.
Other questions? If I'm not mistaken, as of this point, you have not received the contract from council, right? Or
Yes,
the current
the current
fiscal
contract.
year,
Mhm,
which would be the FY 24.
yes.
I believe Mr. Taylor has a question.
So our contract is, the contract is basically the contract that they. You give me a little more information on that. The contract that we given is that's the one that's keeping them. How can I say, keeping them afloat?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, along with a few other grants and stuff that we write and a few other contractors. We have to have a whole bunch of different funding streams in order to keep it fully operational.
So the LRS funding that you guys are receiving, is that, do you guys receive funding like per person that you assist
Yeah,
or?
Per
Okay,
person that we
per
assist,
person.
and that's pretty new. So we haven't started receiving like major
funding.
funds from that yet. Mhm.
I have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
So maybe something ways of New Orleans. This is New Orleans.
No,
Mhm.
So knowing that the funding that you get from the council is kind of what is a large chunk of what's keeping you afloat.
Mhm.
Who is supposed to be familiar with the contractual obligations to keep the money? Like what, like who, like, I thought you mentioned that they were supposed to like send you the audit report within.
Yeah, so like,
A certain-
who's-
Right at the end of the contract period.
Right, within, but you didn't, you got it like, well, we found it on our own and it wasn't given to the council. So whose responsibility is that to keep up with like what is needed from you all, what you guys are.
So that would be me, and then also my assistant director who actually makes sure that the deliverables are being done. So yeah, that would be me. Mhm.
Okay, so it's in the transcript, in the notes. Can we go, or can you give us a rundown of what deliverables y'all have in the contract?
Not offhand, I would have to have the contract in front of me to,
for the council?
for the,
Yes.
It should be.
Yeah,
Do
I know.
we have the FHF like center report in this package?
Should we have a chart? That's
Yeah.
Okay, and then those are just those are
Quarter, and it's up to date.
all those are all our contract deliverables.
Yes, and they met all their deliverables but one.
Mhm.
Okay,
The one that they did not meet was the outreach visits. And they were supposed to have 25, but they only had 18 this year.
perfect.
I have a question. So to randomly choose who's gonna be surveyed, is there a way that the auditor could do that? So that you know that,
To-
I'm not accusing anybody, but to know that they were truly random. To me, I think about it like a statistically.
And, I mean, I think the auditor that did the financial audit, that's not,
Yeah, they don't.
that's not something that
Right,
they
okay,
do.
what about the other audit?
I mean, we do that.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. They do that when they come. Mhm.
We'll randomly call 3, 4, 5 people.
Okay.
Find from.
Yeah, I just didn't know how.
And so I guess the big, not really a question, but so I'd asked if she had received a contract, and she hasn't, because we haven't issued a contract until this discussion was had. Because there were a lot of concerns,
Mhm.
especially from folks on this committee that were brought to us when they found the audit. Because why I was on here to have discussions, get your questions answered, to make a determination of, are we issuing a contract? Is it full funding, or like, what is your wish of what we're doing here? If you make a recommendation that goes to the full council, it's kind of up to you guys at this point of the direction that you would want to take. With this information, we thought it's more appropriate for the committee to discuss rather than staff, just to make a determination of what to do.
When does the fiscal year begin?
Began July 1st.
Mhm.
Our Families Helping Family Centers run off of our state general funds. All our state general funds go to them. So that is the one contract that we have that runs off of the state fiscal year. The rest of the stuff we talk about runs off of our federal fiscal year. So that would be the October 1 through September timeframe.
Has something like this happened with any other family helping family?
I mean, not fairly recently, but you do have issues that pop up from time to time with different centers, where the council has stepped in. It really just depends. I know our most recent history would be our center in Region 3. We had some management concerns there. And so we stepped in there. And that's the only thing that I could think of in the 8 years that I've been here. There have been some other issues that were addressed in previous years before I was here of other centers that I know there's been other issues where centers have closed and started up elsewhere, things like that, but.
Because I was reading the letter, it looks like some of the families have went on to. In the letter, they said they go to a different facility.
Mhm. The FHFGNO, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can tell you that I don't think any center has not received a complaint about another center.
Right.
We get complaints about a center and we help them resolve that. Somebody might get a complaint. I mean, it happens. It just hasn't happened to us to this extent of what they're saying in this letter. I know that in a portion of the letter, they said that they wish that Mary Jacob would run all the centers, or why she couldn't be the executive director of all the centers or something to that extent. I don't know if that was that letter, but
And just for that particular center, we do not.
yeah, they do not contract with that center.
Of the
But
10 centers, that's the one we don't have a
Mhm.
contract with currently.
So why do we not? Sorry.
It's really up to the center.
Yeah.
It's available for all centers. I mean, certainly we contract with 9 centers. If we added the 10th center, then everyone's funding level would change. Because
Mhm.
whatever we have, we split between all the centers that we contract with. But a center does not have to contract with us if they choose not to, for various reasons. I'm not gonna say why or why not we don't with that one, because that's up to that director. But at least since I've been here, we haven't had a contract with them. So I'm not exactly sure how long it's been since we haven't had a contract with that particular center.
So is it possible to renew the contract with some
Stipulation.
attached to it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's been on what your stipulations are. I mean, yeah, it's.
Well, aren't the contracts standard state contracts? So it's got a standard clause in there, remedies for default. So you could terminate it for remedies not being done, but
And
That's in
all of
every
our
contract.
center contracts are the same. We don't, dictate deliverables based on that region or this particular center. One center's not having to do this, and the other one doesn't, and everyone has all the same set of which you're looking at in the chart there. That's in your packet. They all have the same thing. You measure them all based on the same deliverable.
Question. So could we possibly, if we decided to give them a contract, not give them full funding?
You could. The way that would work would then be, we'd still have to utilize that funding, so it would then go to the other centers.
It would just go to the other centers for 1 year. Or how that's.
Yeah, it would, because, I guess that depends on what this committee determines, but if you decide, hey, we want to fund at X amount, I would anticipate that would be for this year to make sure that things are going great, and then next year you're back to, but I guess that would be up to the center, not the center, the committee to determine.
I have a question. Do the other centers have bookkeepers?
Think so.
Yeah, I mean-
Susan, I know her center has a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
Region 5.
And every center is different in that they might have an outside agency that they use. Some have bookkeepers that are a part of their staff internally. This depends.
Can that be something that be in the clause? Is there something in the clause that the centers was, did y'all put that in the clause where the centers have bookkeepers?
Not specific to bookkeepers, but we have statements in the contract that basically say you have to have a center that is operational. And that has to be within good standing. You have to have the staff that is capable of running your center. And so things like bookkeeping and which is why we brought up this audit, 'cause there's things that are addressed in there that kind of fall into that clause. Because as Keisha stated, deliverables were met with the exception of one. And historically, deliverables are met throughout the year, so that hasn't been the concern. But we have concerns with the operations aspect of things. And so that is what's put in our contract, and is what we're basing this conversation off of. It's the concern level for operating.
I guess I have a question for.
You have a question?
No, go ahead, Julie.
Well, I get just back to that was kind of what I was thinking. That's why I was asking, like, when the audit was due. I don't know that we can do the contract and wait until, the audit's finished and completed. But just in terms of, because you had asked about stipulate, like, even if it's something, it's like there's a corrective action, but most of the responses are, we agree and we're gonna do something. So even if it was something like they got their funding, but then each quarter at the council meeting, they needed to come back with a more formal action, like step by step, what are you doing in relation to these responses? So that we're not just waiting until we get the next audit, but we can then see more formally how those responses are being implemented.
Yeah, and
food for thought.
I think I addressed a couple of them in the front letter, where it has the reconciliation policy, the updates to the policies and procedures, the board oversight, the timely filing of annual reports. Those things with me.
I have a question. So how are the contract payment terms set up? Is it monthly payments that are made to you?
Fee for service, monthly payments.
I have a question for you. I just want, what do you think what recommendations do you think that should be done? Like, do you have any recommendations? What should be done or what should be done moving forward?
The funding piece is up to you. What they receive in a contract year, each FHF center is $111,000, $111,946.33.
Oh, can you write that in numbers? Because I'm not good at that.
Yeah, 2020.
I don't go.
And that amount is because we've got the extra $500,000 this year. Normally it's around 56 or so.
No,
Okay. Can you write it?
one.
That is a lot, huh?
Per FHF.
Mhm.
For the contract year. So my only real thought is, you know, if you do not fund the center at all, then you cannot make sure that these changes are made.
Mhm.
So it's likely in the council's best interest to make sure that there is funding. It may not have to be full funding, but there needs to be some funding so that you can follow through and make sure that the changes are made. You know, Julie's idea about a quarterly report on some of those corrective action items that's detailed, I think is a good one. As a way to help track, you know, what they said they were going to do versus what is actually happening. To make sure that the correct fiscal control is. That was the part of the audit that I think was the most alarming, was that there were not good fiscal controls. And so when there are no good fiscal controls, there are a lot of things that could potentially happen. Not saying that they did, but if you don't know what's coming in and what's going out, then you don't know what's in. And I think Brenton said it before, but just to reiterate, if you decide to move forward and fund them at a lesser amount than this 111,946, then whatever money is not given to that center will be redistributed out to the other 8 FHF centers.
Bambi, question or statement?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if there's a way, because I don't want to see that region of the state not have the resources.
Right.
And so is there a way to give, you know, partial and making sure then some compliance checks that things are moving in the right direction? And then as the fiscal year goes on, that they can get the remaining amount of their allocated funds?
That's kind of why I was asking about the payment terms, how it was written out. Because you could, I mean, just taking Julie's suggestion, you could write the payment terms where, you know, the first 3 months they get this, and then after their quarterly report is submitted, then they can get this. I mean, there's so many ways that you can do those payment terms in a contract that would address all of our issues. It would just be different than any other contract that you have. So that might cause a problem with y'all in tracking and monitoring. I don't know, but.
And if there's a fee to doing that, then, you know, then I would say that they have the responsibility of it. But I just would not want to see the funds not go to that region of the state and figure out some way to help them get on track, because they're very vital to know that region of the state. So how can we help them get on track? And if they can't, then we'd have to move on to another option in a later meeting. I guess that's a question to staff. Is that possible to do something like that? You could change the contract terms. Yeah, you could do a lesser amount for the first 3 months, and then you'd have to increase the amount. But what you have to do is make sure that all the money is spent by the end of the fiscal year. The only downside to that is, let's say we get through the first quarter, it's looking good, we increase, we get to the second quarter, so we're 6 months in, and now it's
Now it's not looking good for whatever reason. And then we have to, at that point, go and try to redistribute everything because the money needs to be spent by the end of the year. So
But I'm not necessarily saying have a lesser amount the first quarter. It would be that they have to meet the objectives, like they have to show that they've addressed all of these concerns. If They don't get the next quarter's funding and you move on to doing something else. I mean, I would imagine they have to operate at a certain level every quarter, you know? They have to sustain whatever services we expect them that they should be. should have.
we could do that.
I'm just thinking about the logistics of the contract. So most of our contracts are cost reimbursement where they have to provide the service and then they're getting reimbursed. The FHF centers aren't like that. We provide them a monthly payment every month. And then by the end of it, we're tracking it constantly, but we're trying to make sure that by the end of the fourth quarter, they have met all the deliverables that are on this performance data sheet that's in y'all's package. So what I just asked Amy was, could we change it to a cost reimbursement where we're seeing like, okay, are they meeting these things? And then they'll get the payment for what they've met, if that makes sense. They're getting reimbursed.
Yeah, but I think it's more than that because y'all been monitoring to see that they're meeting the contract goals, obviously. And so they've been doing that and they've been getting the funding. The issue is some other things that you haven't been monitoring. So maybe adding those as part of their contract, and now the staff has to monitor that and they have to be addressing these issues that was found in their audit. Not only the deliverables, but they have to do these other things that were found in the audit in order to get their payment. Does that make sense or?
Yeah, so your thought is keep it fee for service, so they have the standard monthly amount, the same monthly amount as they normally do.
And then add.
But we are in essence adding in some additional deliverables just for this contract to include making sure that the corrective action items are being met. Yeah.
Keep it fee for service, and then each quarter when things are met, or we have that quarterly report that identifies we made these progresses here. Then for that next quarter is what you're talking about, we would increase. Is that?
What Bambi is saying.
There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, what Bambi is saying is it stays at the standard amount, so fee for service at the 111,000 plus. So monthly payments are 9,300.
Okay.
But adding.
We add
additional
additional deliverables for this.
That meets the
For the things that are listed in the audit.
What, no, I'm so sorry, I've never been this unprepared. What are some examples of what's listed in the audit?
So like just one example, just at the top of my head, one of the things that came up in the audit was not having a policy for something. I think it was probably about, that might have been about cash advances, which you just did away with. But if something in the corrective audit action, something the audit said they needed a policy for this, then that would be one of the deliverables. They need to create the policy and we need to see it.
So this one show is.
Is the board chair.
The board chair, yeah, the board
But
president.
this is the corrective action plan, right?
Yeah, the one from the auditor.
Where, what does the. No. I give up. Being.
That's fine.
Yeah. So
That's actually.
that's the
That's the audit. yeah.
okay. Cool. Thank you.
So a couple of things I have just for the committee's entertainment. I mean, if you all don't do anything with it, I still like the idea that someone had mentioned of a quarterly report that addresses these particular actions that should be taken. But
Thank you.
I would, I still, at least for my satisfaction as someone that's responsible for monitoring, I haven't got a clear picture of management responsibilities and why there was this lapse. And I understand family problems. I could name some other directors that have had issues with their health, their children, their spouses, but we're not here. So what I would like, if the committee would like it, this is just a recommendation. I'd like to see some sort of, I don't want to say management, but more of a leadership assessment. So this would go for you, this would go for your deputy, this would go for anyone that has a leadership role if you have supervisors. What this assessment is going to do is determine all of your knowledge, your skills, your abilities, where are all your deficiencies, and almost kind of like an organizational assessment, if you will, as far as leadership goes. And it identifies where you have these struggles and what actions are going to be taken to address those things. Like you just told us, you're being more present, which is great. But we're still in this situation. What does more present mean? How is that happening? And something very detailed that we can.
So I think with that is my number 2 is not, I guess she's not well versed on all of the things that I do. So if I'm not around and something doesn't get done, it doesn't happen until I'm back to make sure that those things have happened. And so I think what we started to do was I actually started just working on different things like succession plans. Here's what happens. This is what needs to happen here. This is what needs to happen there. So that she can have a visual of what needs to happen when I'm not around, or, if this issue comes up, this is where you go. This is how you handle it. I think that was one of the issues that we identified. I've actually just started working with a organizational coach person who's a former HR person who actually just did some things for us at the center, and who was also going to help with those organizational struggles that we see. Like I said, 2 years prior, I didn't have any of these struggles or these issues. It only came until after the world was in disarray with COVID. Other than that, I haven't had any issues or any struggles with leadership at the center.
I can appreciate that, but I would still, it's up to the committee, but I would still like to see a written assessment identifying those deficiencies and how they would be better. And it sounds like you're already doing some of that.
So, yeah, and so my
these
question.
Things, the additional deliverables that would be added, it seems like you're.
Right, so
already
how
doing
would,
those things.
that's what I was about to say. How do you want us, or how do you want me to report that? Do you want me to have the person or who the person that's doing this write a report, or is that something that, you're adding to? How do you want to know that that has happened and is happening consistently or on an ongoing?
Are you talking about the quarterly report on addressing the corrective action items?
Well, the leadership assessment.
So I mean, it does sound like you have someone in play, the organizational person you're talking about. So I don't necessarily think that they have to be the ones that would present the information. I think it would be a benefit for them to do the assessment to identify, because I would hope that they would be an unbiased party. And just through conversations and assessment with you and Shay and any other leadership. Because again, this isn't, I don't have it as a targeting you specifically. Leadership as a whole within the center, those that have
understand.
leadership. And it can even include whatever your board president or chair is responsible for doing as well. But figure out as a whole, what you have to do to be a viable center, what areas we struggle, like, for instance, bookkeeping may be one. And maybe you've decided that you and Shay are sitting with your bookkeeping agency to understand how they're doing things. If something happens there, it turns out that you pick up from there.
Yeah.
But be very specific, because one thing that we noticed in this corrective action plan, in the corrective action plan that was included in the audit, it's not detailed enough. Like we need the specific detail. Who's responsible for what? How's it happen? Because that's how we get the question answered. And if we have additional concerns, we know who we're going to.
Right.
You talked about setting up a succession plan, which hey, I think that'd be great to know what that succession plan.
Looks like.
Like those specific things. Just so we get an idea of what we can expect moving forward. But again, that's up to the committee if they would want you to do that quarterly report, if they would want that management assessment, if they want to do the additional deliverables for the contract amount that's,
So do you need a motion?
we would, yes.
A motion.
Wait, I don't think you're on this committee, Eric. You're on education and employment. I'm sorry.
Just trying to keep it rolling.
Yeah.
Taking care of it.
Thanks, Gary.
Take a shot at it. Go for it, Julie. So I'll make a motion to continue the contract with the funding as currently in the contract. With the stipulation of additional deliverables to include a formal leadership assessment and formal quarterly reporting on actions and data related to the corrective action plan.
I think it-
Make me do these all.
I know.
Oh, dear. Oh, deliverable.
DELIVER.
Or
ABLES. Got it? Anybody want to second it?
I'll second it.
Who's that?
Sherry.
Okay, so is there any discussion? Or any public comment? So we can motion to recommend.
Yeah, I'm still trying to type it. I'm sorry. I'm having words here.
No, we can motion to recommend to continue the contract with Families Up and Families New Orleans at current funding level, but require the following. A quarterly report addressing concerns noted in FY 22 audit, detailed actions taken and data to support changes, leadership assessment to address the current needs, and actions that will be taken to address the current identified needs.
Okay, so it seems like Yes, it's really just two things. You want to continue the contract at the current funding level.
Mhm.
Include a quarterly, include increased deliverables, which is what the plan, right? It could be a quarterly report addressing concerns noted in the FY 22 audit and with detailed actions taken and data to support the changes made. And then leadership assessment to address current needs and actions that will be taken to address current identified needs. That sound about right? I'll try to get it on the screen.
Yeah, and what I mean by it's by the data, what I mean is like, the example you gave, like a policy and procedure, it might not just be, because I think there was something in here about, okay, we're gonna do that, we have a policy, but then what are you finding? Because it says you need to do a management analysis. So not just that you've got a policy and procedure, but then through your analysis, what are you now finding on a quarterly basis? Or what are you looking, is there data that you're looking at, looking for trends and patterns or things like that?
Any discussion? Did we cover that part? Any public comment?
Any objection? Any abstentions?
Try to get it up there, guys, in a second. And I don't have to wordsmith this a little bit, but I just want to get it there for you. Continue contract with FHF NOLA at current funding level, but require the following: quarterly report addressing concerns noted in the audit, detailed actions taken and data to support changes. And I listed kind of some of the things I talked about: policies, procedures, findings, recommended analyses, trends that are identified, and the leadership assessment to address current needs and actions that will be taken to address those needs that are found. Anything, am I missing anything? Does that sound about what you were looking for, Julie? And this information will be added into the contract that we currently have. Or that we will have. We'll update it to include that information. Okay. And so since there were no objections or
Like
abstentions, right?
listed. Like on the contract, listed like individually. Like listed like, you know, quarterly report, you get 504, but it'll be listed in the. Like that.
This thing, how we don't structure. I don't. We just make.
And then we could also.
Okay, so first on the agenda is an update on non-contractual activities. We have Julie Hagan, OCDD, who will share with us updates from the department. Julie, would you like to get us started?
Sure. So in the interest of time, I'll try to keep it high level, but be able to answer questions. I know we have a hard stop at 3:00. So the first item, and this is a report that you guys had asked me to include for the Self-Determination and Community Inclusion Committee and some of the highlights of things that we've been asked to report on before. So first up is a update on Act 421 or TEFRA. So since the program started in January of 2022, we've received 2,665 applications. And at this time, as of the end of May, we have 1,146 children who are part of our TEFRA program. Gives you guys some breakdowns of number of the applications, 43% approved and 38% denied. And then in there, that 17% are still under review, which is why it doesn't equal the 100%. We have had folks to withdraw applications as well. So that is information on our TEFRA program. In terms of some of the major activity updates, I know we're in veto session. We're not anticipating major changes with the LDH budget. Who knows? So as of today, there were no major reductions to our OCDD budget or any of our home and community-based waiver budgets. We did have two increases. One, in our early steps program, we did receive, we have renegotiated some contracts. And so there's some increase to adjust the contracts. And then we are continuing to see a steady increase. During COVID, there was a steady decrease in the number of children supported and the number of services through early steps. And now we're seeing that number come back up. So we are, we received some increase again for those contracts, and because we're anticipating increase children served and services. And then there was some acquisition and major repair for our two facilities, Pinecrest Supports and Services Center and Central Louisiana Supports and Services Center. I won't go into all of these. I did list for the legislative update the legislation that OCDD is in any way potentially involved in. Again, if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them more directly. The ones that OCDD is only lead on one of these, and that is House Resolution 209, which asks the department to form a study group to study the uncompensated work of support coordination agencies. So basically, when somebody gets a home and community-based waiver offer, the first thing they have to do is choose a support coordination agency. And so at that point, the support coordination agency has work to do. They don't get paid until the person actually begins receiving waiver services. So what they're asking us to do is study what happens in between. There are some federal regulations about what we can or can't do there that we'll have to consider, but that's what they are asking for that report to be on. We'll also be actively engaged. This came up in Joint Medicaid Oversight Committee. There's been some discussion around abuse and neglect and things that happen. So House Resolution 173 asked the department to report on statistics on abuse and neglect in certain Medicaid programs. So we'll be working jointly with Health Standards Section, Office of Aging, and Adult Protective Services on and OBH on reporting some of those. The report or providing a report related to that. There may be some other agencies that we pull in as we continue to work on that report. Again, I think that others, there's OCDD may be a part of those bills or studies or resolutions. But the next update is COVID. So we are now, we had done the road show to talk about what would happen when we get to November 11th, which is 6 months after the end of the PHE. And our exceptions and a lot of our exceptions and flexibilities will change. And so we are where we are now is, I think starting next week, we have a training for support coordinators on the details of all those changes. That will be followed by a training for all of the providers. And then that will be followed by a training for people in self-direction. We're offering multiple trainings for each of those. And again, it's just getting into the details, especially around family as paid caregiver, I will say, I'm not sure why, but there still seems to be an understanding that when we get to November, family members living in the same home won't be able to continue as paid caregivers, and that is not accurate. There just will be additional safeguards and guardrails that we had to put in place, but there still seems to be information out there that it absolutely has to stop, and it doesn't. But again, there's just additional steps and additional processes that'll need to happen. So again, we're going to do all we can to make sure we have that as clear for folks as we can. And then again, we will also have a training for those family members that are serving as paid caregivers to make sure that they do understand some of the requirements around what you must do. Because it's not, if you're living in the same home, sometimes it's not always as a parent. And we haven't really been monitoring or checking that during COVID, things like using EVV and documentation and progress notes. So we want to make sure people have all the information they need to be successful. And then we are planning to do another regional stakeholder meeting in the fall, so that we got a lot of really good reception from the one that we did a few months ago. So we're going to try twice a year to do kind of regional town hall meetings. And one of the topics will be, post PHE. We're trying to strategically make sure we can do it before we get to that mid-November timeframe, but we'll also have some other things that we're talking about there. And then finally, and I'll just get through and then stop and take questions, but the American Rescue Plan Act, the START team, we have begun engagement with the START team. The START team, they work with other states. They're recognized nationally as a group who can set up models in states to help support people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities and co-occurring behavioral health issues. And what they do is they come into your state and they do an assessment and try to get a feel for what's working and what's not working. They've done some meetings with our internal folks, and now they're starting to meet with stakeholders and advocates. So you may be seeing some opportunities coming up really quickly in terms of giving them your feedback, from the provider perspective or from the family perspective or from the individual perspective. If you do have, a behavioral health condition and intellectual and developmental disabilities, what are you needing that you're not able to access, so that we can do a true gap analysis and then identify. We do know that what they put up, what they do in a lot of other states is they tried to do everything they can to help people stay living in the community. So there's a lot of times, most of the time when people end up having to leave their home, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, now it's because they have complex medical needs or complex behavioral needs that they're not really getting the support for. And so what this team does is try to help identify what can we do to help make sure you have what you need to prevent having to go into more institutional type settings. But we still know sometimes there is need for something that's crisis. You just can't, you might need some short term. And for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's not often to go to a 7-day stay at an inpatient psychiatric where they give you some medication and then say, congratulations, now you can go back home. And we know that doesn't work. So what they do is set up these models where it might be, it's more treatment, it's longer term, it is geared for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but it is still acute. So we don't have people who are stuck sitting in an emergency room for 2 or 3 weeks waiting to find a place for them to go. So it's acute, it's quickly responsive. And again, the goal is to get you what you need very quickly so you can get back home. So you don't have to be stuck somewhere. So we're really excited. They have some really great outcomes from other states that they've been able to show. So we're excited that that's moving. And then some of the others we're still kind of working to move those forward. I will say we finally on Friday received notice that we were able to make bonus payments for our direct support workers and support coordinators. It's only been 1.5 years in the making. And we had yesterday, we had a webinar for our personal care tenant provider agencies and our support coordination agencies. So we could explain to them what they needed to do when they get this money. The money will begin to be paid out next Tuesday, July 25th. There is also going to be a webinar on Monday, July 24th. for people who are self-employers and self-direction. If you're listening to this and you didn't get it, please call Acumen or Morning Sun because they were supposed to make sure everybody got notice of the webinar. And what that webinar, each of the webinars focuses kind of on what do you need to know? So what did the providers need to know? What the support coordinators need to know? So what the meeting on Monday will focus on is this is what, if you're in use self-direction, you need to know, how are your workers going to be paid and how's that going to happen? So we will have information there on Monday. All of the trainings are being recorded and we're working right now to get those because we've had a lot of questions. Will the webinars be posted online? And they will be. We're working right now to get them converted and get them online now so that if you have questions, then you can go back and review that. But I'm really excited that we were able to do that. That's really been probably one of the single most areas of concern that we been getting a lot of calls on. I only wish we would have been able to do that sooner. And then we just got approval on some new initiatives. We had some extra American Rescue Plan Act dollars that we weren't spending. And so we are looking at using them to have some additional models for people with the co-occurring intellectual and developmental disabilities and behavioral needs. We've learned some from other states that there are some things like shared living options or other services in lieu of, again, institutions that have been really successful for people. And so we're wanting to use some money there to pilot that. We mentioned at the last meeting, I think we know what a serious issue the direct support workforce crisis is and not having staff to provide the services. And so we know that there are things like pay that are impactful, but we also want to do what we can to just help look for other ways to build up that workforce. And it's not even just with our direct support staff. We know that there are children and adults living at home who need skilled nursing, and we can't find nurses, the adequate number of nurses to provide that skilled nursing. We know that there's a lack of having behavioral health professionals who have experience working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So what we're wanting to do is go in and start working in the universities and colleges. We have agreement from Southern and BRCC for sure. We're working with a couple of others to do partnerships where we go in and help them build curriculum. So while you're a student in nursing school, in social work school, in, psychology, that you have an opportunity to have some curriculum around supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. In the social work, we're hoping to influence our support coordinators or case managers so that we have more trained, more folks with that training there. And then through like BRCC, we're hoping to have folks come out and be interested in being direct support professionals, but also all of those people, while students, can be direct support professionals. So can we build on that too and help people know, hey, this might be something that you could do even part-time while you're going to school. So we're trying to build that through our university partnerships and curriculum development. And then finally, the final new thing that we got is to look at, we've been talking about doing an electronic assessment and plan of care for, 20 years now. And so we are asking for extra money to finalize our assessment. And not only will we use that assessment, that will then inform the plan of care, but our stakeholders have been asking us to go to a consolidated waiver also for a long time. One of the things we haven't been able to do to get us to a consolidated waiver is we have to have a way of, you can call it resource allocation, but it's also like we need an assessment that based on this assessment, it tells us you need this level of service, right? Or you can call it a tier, you can call it a cap, you can call it an allocation. Right now, you kind of either get supports waiver row or now. Ideally, we want to just you have an assessment and it says this is the type of services in the array. So what we want to do with this money is we have to do a fairly large sample size with the assessment, like over 3,000 people, to be able to say, do we have the right algorithm and statistics and all that to show that that this tool gets folks in the tier that they need to be in. And so we want to use money to try to finally push that across the line. Again, we've been trying to do it for at least 10 years. We've had the tool itself developed for at least 3, but a lot, the IT and getting the sample done has been our downfall. So we are hoping that we can finally get that across the finish line too. Again, we have until March of 2025 to spend these funds. So it seems like that's far away, but that'll be here before we know it. So we are going to be having when we talk about our major activities for our office, usually I try to get ideas from folks, but really what we're focusing on are these activities. It's going to take all of our bandwidth and all of our resources to bring these across the line by March of 2025. All righty. I almost did 2:35. I talked really fast and said a whole lot, so I'm also happy to take questions.
Really, do you know where, we could find about the virtual meetings? Law that changed?
The Senate Bill 201, the open meetings law.
Yeah, because I wanted to go to some meetings that weren't just for developmental, like weren't just for disabilities. And I've had trouble in the past where they said that you don't need accessible accommodations. So just, I want to say it politely when I'm asking them to do it, and I'd rather just cite where, do you know where it would be on the Attorney General site yet, or?
So in Act 393, and if you look at legis.la.gov and you search for Act 393, that's the bill, that's the act right there.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, as Ebony's whispering to me, it's technically effective August 1st, but every state body is going to have to promulgate a rule. And as of right now, I haven't seen any rules yet. So I don't think it will truly be in a workable position August 1st, but hopefully shortly thereafter, rules will start coming out. And the general assumption is that each agency that sort of has these types of bodies will have to create their own rule.
But that doesn't mean that if a body just decides we're not gonna promulgate rules, we just won't follow this law. They don't have an unlimited amount of time to do that.
Right.
So what is the time frame?
I wanted to do it politely, they've denied me like pretty recently.
Well, they don't have to do it now
Yeah.
until August 1st.
That's what I was waiting, yeah, and I just wanted to put the bill on there, like, so that it looked like.
There's a time frame in the act that says promulgate a rule by the state. I don't think there's.
I mean, it says effective August 1, so I wonder if they're thinking starting August 1, then we got to start developing our plan. Depending on how they interpret it.
Technically, like the Attorney General for open meeting law.
Yeah, I mean, they would get involved, I guess, if you have a department that's not doing what they need to do. But yeah, I don't think there was a whole lot of guide. They left it broad. I know that was the conversation in general, leave it broad so you don't tie anybody's hands. But yeah, that was one thing. I don't recall a specific time frame for promulgation.
Yeah, it can't hurt to ask Attorney General's. I know they do training on open meetings law through Attorney General's office too, so.
Is there a chance that chair's person can end up being virtual?
The way that it's written, I don't think so.
All right. The way it's written, we would still have to have an anchor location. And the person that facilitates the meeting would still need to be in person, which means if you're the chair of a committee or the full count, you would have to be here at this meeting.
Okay. No big deal.
All right, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Julie. I think that we're running a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little. Not
Okay.
too bad though.
So please keep it brief with your updates and the committee, you can find this information in the status report and your Blue Council meeting packet. So now we will move on to our contractual activities. Stephanie, I believe you're filling in for Hannah and we'll provide us updates on the partners and policy makers, videos and few leadership initiatives.
Yeah. So I will be very brief. All right, because we are, I see the time. So first I'll start with partners in policy making. We had 13 participants, 12 of them graduated. They completed the final 3 sessions. They graduated in June. All of those sessions and the graduation were held in person at the Baton Rouge Marriott. And the applications for next year's class are going to be going live soon. That information is going to be shared on our website, on our through Constant Contact. So if you're signed up for our listserv and also on our social media. So that should be going out very soon. For the activity 1.1. Oh, do you want me to just roll through? Okay. For activity 1.1.5, that is the videos. We have been meeting with 23 East Group, which is formerly O'Neill Communications. They're developing their fully included video plan. They've begun editing, filming, developing graphics and how-to videos. Some of the topics that we have talked about were supported decision-making, specifically the Dustin Gary Act, early steps, waivers, and TEFRA, IEPs, and LRS. For 1.1.9, which is the Youth Leadership Forum, it was just held this past weekend. We'll have a full update in the next status report, but just to kind of give an overview, all of the speakers were finalized and participants confirmed. They had all of the paperwork for the staff turned in. We had 11 delegates. There were 12, but one person did not turn in paperwork in time. I think I have that. That's also in the status report. It was pending. It was due the 31st. They didn't turn it in time, so they did not go. But just to give a little update on YLF, on the 13th, so July 13th, they had their staff introduction and training. So that was just staff. On the 14th, so that was Friday, they had a full day. I kind of just wrote it as like an introduction day and team building, because throughout the whole weekend, they had different panels for the delegates to go to. But the main focus on that Friday was really for all of the delegates to get comfortable with the setting and with each other. On July 15th, that was Saturday, was the Capitol Day. So they took a bus to the Capitol. They met with the a couple of LACAN leaders, had a tour of the Capitol and learned about advocacy. And then on the 16th, which was Sunday, the main thing was wildlife. And the delegates kind of did like a game of life. They met with different representatives. They had a little board game. They played a real world game of life. Right now, we are waiting on the survey results from the delegates and from the staff. And once we get that information, it will be on that next status report.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone have any questions? Before we move on. Great, now Rakisha, will you give us an update on LACAN, Families Helping Families and Supported Decision Making?
Yes, ma'am. All right, with LACAN currently has over 6,759 individuals registered to receive information and action alerts as it relates to home and community-based services, education, and early intervention. We've had 16 action alerts. with 2,266 actions taken. We've had 9 yellow shirt days with 134 individuals being in attendance and 24 testimonies being provided. The leaders have supported their members in a total of 84 formal legislative visits, and 49 of those visits were with key committee members. We've had 238 LACAN members participating in a total of 28 virtual or in-person regional LACAN member meetings. During those meetings, they discussed topics such as the agenda and outcomes of the 2023 legislative session, legislative process and how to become an active member, and also ways to take action and connect with your legislators. Over the next couple of months, the leaders will be scheduling and hosting at least 2 community input meetings. These meetings will give each region an opportunity to share issues they feel the council should include in the next legislative advocacy agenda. They do continue to have 2 leader conference calls a month, and they discuss updates, concerns, and issues, and also develop strategies to maintain and support the LACAN leaders. Recently, we've had a debriefing meeting that was held on June the 29th. And during that meeting, we recapped the 2023 legislative session and discussed strategies to improve the advocacy efforts for next year, for the 2024 legislative session. And we do have an upcoming summer leader training, and it will be scheduled, it is scheduled for August the 24th, and that's to provide continuous education for the leaders. And some good news, we do have a leader hired for Region 9. She is projected to start on August 1st. So that's something good. So that's it for LACAN. Y'all want me to move on to FHF real quick? Or you want questions? Okay. As far as FHF, Families Helping Family Centers have assisted over 18,072 individuals with developmental disabilities and their families with providing information, referrals, peer-to-peer, and other supports needed. More than 28,684 units of information and referrals have been provided. 360 trainings have been conducted with more than 7,237 individuals being in attendance. The centers have conducted over 334 outreach activities within hospitals, pediatrician offices, school districts, ABA, and physical therapy clinics. If you guys notice in your packet, you do have the 4th quarter performance data. We kind of looked at it a little bit earlier, but if you look at the data, the last time it was updated for you guys, July the 12th. But since then, we have a couple of updates. For the first update is for New Orleans, which is Region 1. Section 504, instead of 1 meeting being completed, they have 2 meetings that was completed. And for Region 3, instead of, in the area of individuals identified for legislative visits, instead of them having 0, they have 6 that have been identified. And I do want to bring you guys' attention to the information and referral units for Region 3, Bayouland. During this fiscal year, they changed database reporting companies. So with that being said, we had some information that wasn't being, I guess, reported accurately. And once it was brought to their attention, they worked very, very closely with the company to rectify it. It has since been rectified, but it's not reflected on here because unfortunately, that particular company cannot go back and fix numbers. They can only make sure it's accurate moving forward. But I did want to let you guys know that they have a total amount of contacts, whether it's been in person or by phone, of 5,360 for this fiscal year. And with the total contacts, basically what that means is anytime they have a contact, whether it's in person or over the phone, you're basically giving some type of information to them or referring them to an outside entity that can, help them with whatever need they came there for. So with that being said, they definitely met that deliverable a long time ago. So the great thing is, All of our centers met their deliverables for this year, but one, which is New Orleans, but we already discussed that earlier. They only missed it by one particular deliverable that was unmet, which is the outreach visits. They had 18 instead of the 25. And the last thing that I did want to let you guys know, we kind of discussed that earlier too. We will be doing some audits with all of the centers in the next upcoming months. So hopefully by the next quarterly meeting that we have with the council, we'll be able to kind of let you guys know how those audits went. And for my last one, which is supportive decision-making, this is real quick. The trainings, they've completed 7 out of their 10 trainings, with 157 participants being in attendance. They do have the last 3 scheduled, and that's scheduled for the month of July, and I should have those updated numbers for the next council meeting as well. And for membership, they have 8 self-advocates that are currently being mentored through the supported decision-making process, and 4 of those self-advocates have completed the process, but they're still being monitored. Any questions, comments, or concerns? I know I went really, really quick, out of breath.
Any questions for Lauren?
All right.
I have a question because so are these numbers on this chart gonna match Mr. Jum's numbers on his report tomorrow?
I don't know if he included that information right there on there, but Nicole has it.
Yo.
The report that we have that we kind of came up with, these are just fourth quarter
Okay.
items, just to give you an idea of how, what it looks like with our contacts from. We have the wrong date. This is 6 months, but it could be the fourth quarter of this fiscal year 23. So it's gonna be a little different. What you have in your duty council is the full year.
And just to kind of add to that, what we provide you in that chart that we just looked at is specific to our contract. What they discuss is their intent of adding that report to the agency reports is to give you more information about FHF in general, of everything they do, not just what they do based on our contract. So the information may not always match up because they do a ton more than just what we're asking them to.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank y'all.
Any other questions? Okay, Britton, will you give us an update on the remaining initiative?
Sure. So super fast activity 2.2.1, that's our first responder pilot. And so this is where we contracted with Interaction Advisory Group. And so they're training first responders on basically their approach to individuals with developmental disabilities and hoping that that could reduce arrests and escalations in their work. And so a majority of all the information you need is included in your status report, which is in the blue folder that you'll get. If you haven't got it yet, it's your main council meeting folder. But in May, there was a 3-day training in Terrebonne Parish, and then a community engagement event as well, where you bring in the community with these first responders. We had really great feedback from that one. I included that in your packet. It's from one of the participants from the Houma Police Department. In June, there were 3 trainings that were done in St. Tammany Parish. And those were with a new cadet class. So these were folks that were just getting certified, post-certified to start working there. And there was also a training in St. Charles Parish. And so there was some feedback from the St. Charles Parish Sheriff there, very positive feedback that was included in your packet as well. So to date, we've had 415 first responders trained this fiscal year. We had 51 individuals that attended a community event. Another training that was done, and this was more just based off of what Allen Parish School System had heard about the trainings that IAG has been doing with some of the law enforcement agencies and first responder agencies. that school district actually asked the trainer to come in and provide a training for their school district. And so included there were over 90 school administrators, teachers, counselors, paraprofessionals, special educators, and I think there were also 6 school resource officers involved in that. And so that was something, that's really cool. It's not a part of our contract for him to do that, but he wanted to include it just to show that word is getting out about this training. And so other people are reaching out to him to start bringing that training to them. I think at the last meeting, we had mentioned that some law enforcement agencies in Mississippi heard about the training he was doing here and asked him to start doing a training there for them as well. So there is a reaching effect. And so hopefully maybe some more school districts will start catching on to some of these trainings and bring them in. But we do have some school resource officers as well that are a part of these other law enforcement agencies and first responder agencies that attend these trainings, just as part of their annual trainings. Our emergency preparedness and response training, that's activity 2.2.2. We've contracted with Niagara University for that one. This past quarter, we had a training May 1st through 2nd in Monroe, and there was another one, Shreveport, that was May 3rd through 4th. We actually had a really good turnout in Monroe. There were 32 people that attended that training. Shreveport, not so much. There were only 4 that were in attendance at that training. I'm not sure what the issue was there as far as turnout. I know we had some struggles trying to get a training scheduled in Shreveport. So I don't know specifically if there was a buy-in problem there from the community or from the emergency managers in that area. Or with the close proximity between Shreveport and Monroe, you had folks that attended one more so than the other. They are bringing the training to South Louisiana again in September. In the Houma Thibodaux area in Gray specifically, there's going to be a training September 25th through 26th. That information was shared via LADDC News earlier this week. I want to say Monday or Tuesday. It's also on our website. So if you're interested in attending from that area, you have the option of a full day, a full 2-day training or a half-day training. And we are working or trying to get something scheduled in Lake Charles for around that time frame as well. That's been one of the areas that we'd really like to go to. And so we're working in to try to get something in there around that time. So I don't have the dates for that one set, but that's kind of the targeted area. But with the registration only being live for a couple of days for the Houma Thibodaux area, there's already 13 registered for the 2-day and 6 for the half-day. And so this contract, y'all did renew it when you voted on your new plan. So hopefully, we'll hit some more areas starting October 1. I know there's been more interest to get back into the New Orleans area. Hammond has showed interest. Lafayette, I don't know that we have anyone specifically that has shown interest, but that's an area that we'd like to hit as well because we haven't been there yet. So I think that's it for those training or that update. Any questions there? Great.
So hearing no additional questions, we will move on to announcements. Please note tomorrow is the full council meeting, which will start at 8:30 a.m. You also have a meeting evaluation in your packet. Please complete it for us. Does anyone on the committee have any announcements to make? Hearing none, if there are no objections, we can adjourn by unanimous consent. Any objections? I hereby adjourn the meeting at 3:01.